I hope you can read that, but what we have done is just described here some of the different approaches lead companies or major sort of companies, multinationals, et cetera, use with their supply chains. For example, Philips. There's three different types of approaches that they typically use. There is the light touch. In fact, if you look on the left side of that matrix, each of those falls into one of these three approaches. There's the light touch, the medium touch, and the hard touch. In the light touch, it's about technical assistance, about audits that the company pays for or gets some assistance from governments or one of the World Bank or some institution like that. In the second category, or the medium touch, the company requires that any of the purchasing for that particular company from the suppliers that they purchase from has certain standards that the supplier must meet. There are certain possible also labeling and some other standards that they must meet. So there's some procurement requirements that the suppliers must meet. And in the final approach, companies absolutely demand that the suppliers must carry out energy audits or meet certain efficiency standards or certain appliance standards, et cetera. So you see all three of these. Now, let me just sort of say that this is, not a very easy solution to energy efficiency, even though it's quite clear that for many companies, 60 to 80% of the footprint on carbon or water or whatever is related to their supplier base. Most companies have limited leverage with their suppliers. Companies, for example, if we just name some names like Walmart, have often sort of, they reserve their goodwill or their leverage for cost reductions for what they purchase. And so there is limited leverage. I think some of us think that there's maybe more leverage the companies, the lead suppliers or big retailers like Walmart have with the supply chains. That's not necessarily the case for energy efficiency types of improvements. The other thing I might point out is many of these companies have very complicated supply chains, and often these chains are all sort of interwoven like spaghetti, and there are thousands of different supply chains. It's not as linear and as straightforward a picture as we normally paint. We have been working on a project with CDP. They have a special initiative for supply chains called Action Exchange. And what they require participating multinationals or major companies or lead companies to do is to also provide information from their suppliers on energy efficiency and water usage and so on. And so based on this data, we did a pilot study in 2013, 2014 timeframe with 6 of the leading members of CDP. Philips was one of them, and went entirely into the supply chains and provided audits. Many of these were actually done in China. And based on these, developed, this was a pilot effort, developed a much more significant effort this year. What CDP also did was, with our help, provided to these whole supplier database some general guidance based upon the type of manufacturing or light industry or buildings that they were running on what the possibilities might be for energy savings based upon more a statistical database. So this project now is going to go into full swing. And I think CDP will now require the member companies and suppliers to actually bear the cost of these audits. The other interesting point I'd like to talk about is UNEP has done a wonderful study on construction, building construction industry. And almost 40 or 50% of the total raw materials that flow through our economy relate to the building construction industry. And as you can see, I mean, in the buildings, you have concrete, you have cement, you have steel, aluminum, glass, and all of these are very energy intensive. And in this report, they talk about Karlsruhe University having done a wonderful graphic, which they call a heat map, in which they show for these building construction supply chains, which is on the leftmost column, aluminum, it reads aluminum, let me see, I can't read it, so I'm sure you cannot read it. Bricks, cement, etc. down the line. And on the right, they show the different footprints on energy usage, freshwater usage, disposed waste, and the global warming potential. And as you can see, you know, the more red it is, the stronger the footprint. This footprint is important because it helps, you know, looking at the building construction industry, for example, as to what could be projects that are relevant, that are interesting, and so on. So I want to go over to the next slide and show you some of the work that we are doing in India that relates to the building construction sector. There is, for example, right now, you know, one of the audience members talked about material efficiency. So we have a project going on where we are looking at the waste from aluminum industry, the smelters, and using it in the cement kilns. We are looking at taking ash from coal plants, power plants, and using it for making bricks. This is being done in India and Bangladesh. We are looking at a major initiative in India to advance the municipal waste as a fuel for cement kilns. And then, not quite related to the building sector, but in the spirit of talking about material efficiency, we are looking at several projects in textile industry, using it, using the waste from it in cement kilns and in other areas. And then lastly, what I'd like to talk about is that in India, with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, we have entered into a memorandum of understanding, MOU, with them to set up a knowledge exchange platform with several purposes in mind. One is to help with the cap and trade program in India, which is known as Perform, Achieve, Trade, or PAT, but also to promote these kinds of supply chain efficiency kinds of projects that I gave you some examples on earlier. And this is in full swing. In fact, a lot of these projects that I just referred to in India are a direct result of this knowledge exchange platform. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, so practice what you preach. So the main impact, and I will show that in the next graph, of our business is in when people use our products. So as a lighting industry, but also the healthcare part of Philips, are not energy intensive, but of course we use energy. And we have a program called EcoVision that set out yet to reduce our carbon footprint by 40% in 2015. So here you see components that probably many of you are also working on. So manufacturing is the top part of the bar chart. Then business travel, non-industrial sites, which is offices mostly, and warehouses. Business travel and logistics. And so, yeah, we are well on the way. So this year had to achieve that, and that will continue. So we're also working with the Carbon Disclosure Project. And we are working, I suspect also as some of you, with We Mean Business on the RE100 program. So which basically is asking then how and by when will you become energy neutral, which is something we're looking at, and we hope to be able to say something in Paris next month. Then, then here I'll explain this graph. So on the left side, you only need to look at the two very low parts, and the right side, actually the upper blue part. It shows that about 6% of the total global footprint of our business, healthcare and lighting, is in our own manufacturing and offices and travel and all the things you just saw. And that 93% of the impact is in the product use. So that's also why we are partnering with all sectors here, but we're also, for instance, in Europe, when there's debate on Europe 2030 energy efficiency targets, you see a classical, I wouldn't say struggle, but a classical simplification of energy efficiency by too many people, also some politicians thinking that industry is against energy efficiency. And I think there we also distinct between energy intensive sector, where you need to do different things, like process innovation, like I think also innovation of new materials that are have less embedded energy as compared to the energy end use. So we then would rather call ourselves, and also other appliances and buildings, energy end use industry. So that's where 93% of the users. So for parts you could say and the imprint of our suppliers I don't even have, because a lot of the energy used for lighting is from glass factories, manufacturing products, so that's even very small. So I don't have an overview of that. So for parts we are looking at our own footprint, you could say, and for parts when we look at the end use, so what happens in society with the products, you could say we are looking at our handprint and how can we reduce that. We spoke about that earlier today. And I think this is then just something we also then, as part of that latter part, so we do we work on all the programs like Enlighten, but also programs with city associations, specifically for city lighting. On building lighting, we're looking, for parts, how do we work with city mayors, subnational governments, also how do we work with other large corporations, because each of them is a potential or an existing customer where we can upgrade lighting. But for part also we track the impact in society by the average efficiency of all the products we put in the marketplace. And there we have also a target of 50% improvement in 6 years until actually the end of this year. And this also is a way that you can see that inefficient lighting is disappearing from our portfolio and gradually being succeeded by more efficient products. So that's a little bit what I wanted to share.